And something magical happened when I stopped listening to the voices in my head and I began listening to the power of my voice in the microphone. I began changing lives, but most important, I began changing mine. I was suppressed, censored, shut down, ignored, and looked down on, until I got the courage to stand in front of the microphone to speak my truth, to teach, to entertain, to laugh, and to celebrate the miracle that it is to be alive and to have a voice.
I oh no.
Welcome everybody. I'm Veronica and this is Studio Steve.
Hey everyone.
And we are the Pod Sound School. And this is the Pod Sound School podcast.
Yes.
Welcome back if you're a regular around here. If not, let me tell you what we do. We provide you with the tools and knowledge you need to podcast with ease and style. On today's episode, we will give you the reasons why you should start a podcast. But before we move on, let me tell you about our Overachievers Club Patreon. Patreon is a platform that makes it easy for you, our faithful listeners, supporters, and followers of our work to support our work by contributing a monthly pledge. You may not know, but we put every waking hour into planning, producing, editing, and publishing our free content on different platforms. This free content does not only show the Pod Sound School talents and high-quality work, but it also benefits the podcast community and those who want to start podcasting and don't have the resources to hire us as coaches.
Please come over and join us there. Well, okay, if you guys are ready, then why don't we get into
why you should start a podcast.
Yeah, here we go. I think you have heard us saying how podcasting is on the rise and how the number of podcast listeners are increasing every year, how Google and Spotify are now offering podcasts to their subscribers, advertising revenue generated from podcasts is growing, and more people are starting their podcast every day.
Yes.
But this episode, we decided to focus on the personal and individual reasons why you should start your podcast.
Yeah, we're going to talk you into starting a podcast. That's our goal by the end of this episode. And we're going to try to keep the episode quick and just touch on a few of the points, the real benefits that you will receive from podcasting and how cool it is to podcast. I'll go ahead and start with number one. Number one is connecting with people through storytelling and through interviewing. So this is a very powerful one. And, you know, when you talk about storytelling, I know this is what draws so many people into podcasting is how there's just so many amazing types of storytelling going on. And it gives you an opportunity to tell your own story, which is awesome, and have your own story be heard. And then that gives you the opportunity to be validated in a way. But then it's also a very powerful way to hear other people's stories or to even provide an outlet for other people's stories.
So one of the things that brought me into podcasting was storytelling. And you were talking about connecting with people as far as networking, right? But there's something like magical about podcasting, and that is how you can share your story and how you can share the stories of other people as well. You can showcase their stories in your podcast. And this is very powerful because, you know, as human beings, we don't go on social settings and, hey, I'm Veronica Davis, let me tell you my story. People's attention span in social settings, it's very short. You're lucky if you get a few sentences in, unless you are the life of the party and you're like very social and you are like a magnet. I'm one of those people that you put me in a social situation and I'm just like, I'm going to be in the corner eating the food, binging on the food and avoiding like eye contact with people. But when you start podcasting, and this is if you decide to go on the storytelling route, and you start telling your story, you may be surprised that sometimes not even your family, the people closest to you, are aware of your emotional and spiritual and your journey through life.
Yeah, it's
and
crazy.
you can take them with you, and they can learn so much about you, and not only them, but when you start growing your show, when you start expanding your circle, how you can find people that will come to you and be like, I've been there. I've been there. I went through the same thing. Like, thank you for doing this. Thank you for giving me the courage to take the next step. Thank you for being an example for me. It's almost like spiritual. It's almost like the reason why we are put on earth is to inspire others
and to share our stories.
And to share our stories. And podcasting is a great way to do this.
It's a great way to do this. And I think the one thing that you touched on that I really love about it is that there aren't any other mediums of expression where people have such a built-in attention span, large attention span. Because, you just think about it, like on YouTube, for example, people only watch your videos for maybe 2 minutes. They need it fast, right? Same thing with television, same thing with social media is even worse. Social media, you got to catch somebody's attention in 15 seconds and then they're gone. But on podcasting, a lot of times, because people are listening to podcasts while they drive or while they clean their house or while they work.
That's one of the points, like how audio content is easy to digest and convenient.
So connecting with people. That's connecting with people is huge.
With people through storytelling.
And
like we said, we have 2 podcast episodes that storytelling is not limited to our stories. You can use storytelling to promote anything that you're selling. There's just all these ways that you can incorporate storytelling. So check out those 2 episodes. And we have videos for
we
those
have 2
if
corresponding YouTube videos too about storytelling.
Is extremely important.
Yeah, we'll leave those storytelling episodes in the link here so that you can go find those if you're interested in your storytelling abilities and getting those chops up.
And what I was saying before, like how you're connecting and you're sharing your story, that just help us to transition on the second point, which is another personal benefit of podcasting is it can be a journey of healing and self-discovering.
Yes.
Healing and self-discovery.
Most definitely. This is the biggest one for me, I think. And this is also the less expected one. And the first point with this, I think, is how powerful and how crazy it is to hear yourself recorded. And then to get the opportunity to listen back to yourself is really interesting because you'll become hyper aware of not only the little nuances in your voice and the weird little characteristics that maybe you didn't realize you did when you spoke, but then also more than that, you have to find confidence within yourself to be able to make those first few recordings. And it can be really tricky, and that's so fun and it's so challenging.
It is.
And it takes a bit of bravery, and it takes a bit of not caring what other people think about you. It takes a bit of really putting yourself out there. And that's really amazing because so often we keep a lot of who we are contained into ourselves, and we also don't always have the avenue to express ourselves. And that's what we were saying with connecting with people too. When we start a podcast, we have a potential to really be heard and to find people who are interested in what we're saying. And in doing that, it's an amazing opportunity for self-discovery.
Yeah, and also sharing intimate details of our stories with other people, putting it out in the world for people to listen and to be inspired. It's healing as well.
Yeah, it's healing. And then when you talk about healing, if you are getting over a traumatizing experience, or if you are suffering from any kind of ailment or depression or illness or anything, podcasting is a wonderful community that way as well. Or if you need to tell a story that you've been holding on to for a really long time. That can be extremely healing, extremely cathartic.
Yeah, there's just so many good podcasts. I came across one the other day, and it's this mom of 2 boys, and she's documenting her journey, how she gave up her job, and now she's a stay-at-home mom. And how she misses that side of her, that working and being at the office side of her, and how she's struggling with body image after having a baby, and how she struggles with postpartum depression as well. And it's just so empowering to see her going through that and to listen to her podcast and see how people are reaching out to her and saying like, we're going through the same struggles that you're going through. Like our house is a mess. We lost ourselves and we lost our identities, and now we're moms, and now we're struggle with schedules and with meals. And so slowly she's finding her community. She's finding other people who are going through the same struggle, and they're all coming together. Mm-hmm. That's another wonderful thing about podcasting.
Yeah, it's insane. And it can change your life. Mm-hmm. It can change how you view yourself. It can change everything else. And that transitions perfectly when you talk about people coming together to our next point, which is it helps to
build relationships.
And it can be a catalyst in improving relationships. It can be a way to communicate with your friends and family and with people in a deeper way than you have before. It's also incredibly fun to do with your friends, and it provides an outlet and a reason to hang out. I know that you found a podcast that was called Martini and Marriage. Martinis and Marriage?
Marriage and Martinis.
Marriage and Martinis.
Yeah, so I'm addicted too. I was when I had time to listen to. But this is a couple that started a podcast because they were having marital issues. Her husband was trying to get sober from alcoholism, and they were like documenting their struggles and their fights and using their podcast. And they're so popular, and they're like raw and real, and you can like hear the kids in the background, and sometimes they fight. And it's being healing for them. I heard her interview and another podcast, and how she was saying like how this whole experience was saving her marriage. Because she got to sit down with her husband and listen to what he had to say, which, like, you would know, like every day, the day-to-day of being a parent, of being a husband, of like all the commitments.
When do you have the time to talk?
When do we have the time to sit down and talk? Like, for example, we have so much fun when we do it.
Oh, yeah. And it's such a fun thing for couples or for friends or for anything. And the other thing, as far as building relationships, and also we talked about interviewing. Well, this gives you, if you have a podcast, perfect platform to interview people in your life. Do you have grandparents that haven't died yet? Are your parents getting old and you'd like to hear their story while they still have their wits about them? What about your coworkers or people that you work with or your friends that you want to learn more about? Oh, you had a friend who was in the Army. You had a friend who went through this experience or who's traveled to all these cool places. And all of a sudden now you have an outlet for all of that fun communication. And in addition...
Yeah, I remember one of my favorite podcasts when I started listening to podcasts. I don't remember the name, but it was like this podcast about grandkids interviewing their grandparents. And it would bring me to tears every single time I would listen to. Because, like, how often do you have the opportunity to sit down with your grandma and grandpa and ask them, tell me your story? And they would, like, open up their hearts and tell them their secrets. And I remember this story, like how 2 days after the grandson interviewed his grandpa, how grandpa died, and they were able to have those recordings of him telling the story because he was a very quiet man. And it ended up, he discovered that his grandpa was a dancer when he was younger, and he was very like outgoing and a party animal. But it was just such a fun podcast. Such a fun podcast.
Yeah, so there's so many reasons to start a podcast. We've already talked about you can connect with people. You can have self-discovery experiences and healing experiences. You can build and nourish relationships, improve relationships, save relationships sometimes. And then the next big reason is it can be
educational.
Yes.
I think no matter what topic you decide to go with, no matter what your podcast is going to be about, it's going to wind up being educational. It's a hobby that is very good for your brain. And
so educational in two ways: educational because you learn, and educational because you teach.
Yes, and you teach, you learn, and educational in more than two ways, because you learn about yourself, you learn about other people. And back to the interview thing again, if you're studying a certain topic, if you want to become more of an expert in one of your biggest passions, then all of a sudden you have this opportunity to interview the top professionals in that topic or the best. I mean, you could really shoot for the moon. You would be so your mind would be blown at the people
Yeah.
that would come onto your podcast.
Yeah,
It's really
that's a
cool.
way to get into circles that you wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Yeah.
Networking is a big part of podcasting, and if you're interested in, like Steven said, in, let's say you're interested in, I like to use the example like Broadway shows, and you want to start interviewing people from Broadway, then you can contact them and you can say, I have a podcast, I would like to interview somebody who does makeup, and you start from the bottom, and then why not interview directors if they give you the time of day.
Yeah. It's crazy. And let's move on to the next and last point for this episode. Now, there's tons of reasons you should start podcasting, but these are more just the personal ones. And the next one is
The low costs.
it doesn't cost a lot to get started. And while saying that, if we have convinced you and you're ready to start podcasting, awesome. You don't have to stop with this episode. We have a lot of episodes that will teach you everything you need to know, ton of free resources for you. And specifically when it comes to costs, we have one YouTube video that tells you how you can start podcasting for free. It's not the most professional way to start, but it's a way you can test the waters. And then if you're ready to start step up from that, we also have a video over on YouTube that tells you how to start a podcast for $100, and that will sound a lot better and be a little more professional.
Yeah, and don't
for
we
you.
have our podcast Jumpstart free guide too?
Yes, and we also have a free Jumpstart podcast guide that you can download for free, and we'll be leaving the link to that in this episode's description as well. So make sure you grab your free copy of that. That will get you started with everything you need to know to come out of the gate swinging, to have a good launch, and to really make a nice impact with your podcast.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, low costs. I mean, you can start it for free. As podcasting is becoming more and more popular, there are platforms like Anchor, like Spreaker, that allow you to do it from your phone. Now, that's where we're talking about doing it for free, assuming you already have a smartphone. But then these USB microphones you can pick up for $60 that plug in directly to your computer. There's free digital audio workstations or audio editors. That's how you clip and snip and fade together the different pieces of audio that you need to do to make your podcast sound fresh and tasty. And there's free ones. Pro Tools First is my favorite. There's also GarageBand, you've probably heard of. There's a program called Audacity that a lot of people used. Those are all free, whether you're on a PC or a Mac computer. So that's the other element of education, is you're going to have to educate yourself how to produce good audio. And you're going to become a little bit of an audio engineer, and
also you're going to have to learn how to promote, how
Yes.
to market.
how to promote and how to
And you're
market.
going to have to become a little bit of a social media
Guru.
Social
media guru. Yes, and that's the other thing. And you'll have to learn how to get out of your comfort zone. That's where you start getting into self-discovery and connecting with people. And one thing you will most definitely find is that the podcasting community is the warmest community. And no matter what topic you want to start your podcast with, no matter what you want to do, you're going to find people who really enjoy what you have to say. So it's pretty cool. We've covered all of the big benefits. Now, before we finish off, why don't we talk about this misconception that podcasting is an oversaturated medium and that there's a podcast about everything and too many people are podcasting. What's your argument against that, Veronica?
Well, yes, there's a podcast for pretty much everything. But with that being said, podcasting compared to video and blogging and social media is relatively new. So there's still room for more people. Like, don't let the fact that there's other people doing what you're doing to discourage you from getting into podcasting or from getting into YouTube or from start writing your blog.
Yeah, that's the reason I think we wanted to do this episode, is because also the other thing you'll hear people say is, well, you can't make money podcasting, or at least not easily. It's not about the money. It's about all these other benefits.
And that's not true.
Yeah,
you can make money.
You can make a lot of money.
You can be
podcasting.
creative and you can make money.
You can make a lot of money podcasting if you're creative about it. You could turn your side hustle of podcasting into a full-time career. Definitely. It's just
it's gonna take some time.
It'll
but
just
it's doable.
Yeah, it's doable if you have that entrepreneurial spirit. If you look at it in perspective of how many bloggers there are or how many YouTubers there are, well, there's still less than 1 million podcasts in the podcast directories. And I would argue even that a good couple 100,000 of those are just sitting there and haven't really even been updated.
Mm-hmm.
And those podcasts are just pretty much on the directories, but they're not really current.
Mm-hmm.
So there's probably less than 500,000 current podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually not a lot in this oversaturated world of how many active users are on Instagram?
Yeah.
Like 1 billion?
Yeah, 1 billion.
Yeah. So what's 1 billion compared to 500,000?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so now's also the perfect time to jump on the train.
Yeah.
And
with that being said, you want to start the right way. And we have so many resources, once again, of how to launch your podcast. We have a guide, we have videos, we have a podcast episode when we talk about the mistakes that podcasters make. And we have a podcast episode about launching your podcast successfully. So if you take all the steps, if you take this seriously, then you're going to be podcasting for a while.
Yeah.
And you're going to get to places with your podcast. You just have to do it the right way.
yeah. And then
We're here for you if
Yeah.
you need our help.
we're here for you if you need our help, and you can find us on social media. You could come find me on Twitter at Pod Sound School.
And you can come find me over at Instagram at Pod Sound School.
Yep. And before we finish up, you know, like I mentioned at the first of the episode, there are all these hidden benefits that you don't even realize until after you've been podcasting for a while, like the self-discovery aspects and everything else. And I think when we first get started podcasting, we start podcasting for ourselves. As humans, we crave the sense of belonging, and we're fascinated by this idea that we are unique and we want to be validated. And this is great. You know, the human desire is what has thrusted us into the era of social media, where each one of us can have a voice. Each individual one of us now has this platform of expression, and our lives are important, and our day-to-day struggles in this virtual world, we can belong. We can find a place of belonging, and we can be seen. So podcasting has that same appeal to it, and anyone can have a podcast. Everyone's invited. It's not restricted. But what will keep us podcasting? Many people start a podcast, but they don't keep doing it. I heard, and I don't know if it's a real average or not, that people don't really make it past the 7th episode. Another thing I've heard thrown around is that people don't make it into the double digits. The vast majority of podcasts that get started, they end pretty soon. And that makes sense, but what's going to keep us podcasting? What keeps us podcasting is the listener, is our audience. This is why podcasting is so powerful and is something that everyone should try. It's not only a journey of self-discovery, but it's a channel of communication with others who are like you. So we start podcasting for ourselves. We start podcasting to talk, but we keep podcasting when we learn to listen. And if we listen, we'll hear that those who are like us, who struggle with the same things we do, who laugh at the same stupid jokes, who are fascinated by the same morbidities, who dance to the same beat, if we listen, we'll hear what it is that they desire the most. And we'll adapt ourselves to grow so that we can continue serving them. And we'll become a better, or even, dare I say, the best version of ourselves. And in doing so, we'll help others who are like us to do the same. And at the Pod Sound School, that's what we do. We help you find your listeners so that your listeners can help you find you.
Oh.
And with that, happy casting, everyone. And
Don't forget to subscribe.
don't forget to subscribe.
Don't
and
forget to leave a review and
a rating and review.
rating and review.
And then also, I know.
don't forget to share us with the world, to share us with your friends.
And if you're ready to start podcasting, I hope we've convinced you. We have a ton of free resources here, and
you can hire us too.
You can hire us, and we're going to assume that we have convinced you. So the next few episodes after this one, you'll definitely want to subscribe to be notified to those, because there'll be more getting back to the basics stuff, what you need to do to start that podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.